So let's be honest. When we go to Mass, when we go to adoration, a lot of times it's very difficult for us to enter into this time, enter into these celebrations. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we approach these things. Very much the society and a lot of our obligations come before going to Mass and going to adoration. We've got our schoolwork, we've got our social life, we've got family life, we've got just time that we need to be by ourselves, times that we need to just sit back and relax and just be able to process what's going on in our lives. We don't tend to put Mass and adoration, our time with Jesus, in the front of everything else. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how do we get past this, how do we deal with these distractions in our lives so that we can really give our time to Christ and get the most out of Mass and adoration. The first thing that we can do to help us really enter into Mass and adoration is just simply understanding what's happening. And not in a sense of knowing exactly what's going on at each and every moment of the celebration that's happening. But it's something as simple as when you walk into the church, are you being reverent? When you walk into a church, do you just sit down in a pew, pull out your phone, and wait for Mass to start? Or wait for Jesus to be brought out onto the altar? We can do so many things such as blessing ourselves with holy water. That's a great way to start any way that you enter into church, any way that you enter into the Mass. And especially now that we're at home, get yourself some holy water. This could be something like calling the front office and asking them to have some ready for you to come and pick up really fast throughout the day. This could be if you have a priest friend or if you have holy water already at home, blessing yourselves with holy water. A lot of us don't have access to holy water, so that could be a little more difficult. And something that we could easily do is set aside a specific place in your home right now where you can really be reverent when you're present during Mass and during adoration through these video conferences that we've been doing. Another very easy thing for us to do right now, and when we're able to be together in our community at Mass and in the church together once more, is really being prepared for Mass. So not just entering in and blessing yourselves, but it could be something as simple as reading the readings ahead of time. You can go online, there's websites that you can use, there are apps that you can use on your phone, there are books and missalettes that we can have access to at home that you can read the readings ahead of time so that you have an understanding of what are we going to be talking about today at Mass. Is there any way that I can personally relate to that? And that'll help you really focus more when it comes to the homily, when it comes to the music that's being chosen, when it comes to the different communal prayers that are being said, and just a way for us to enter in, but also it'll be easier for us to just really let Jesus talk to us, because you don't have to sit and open the book and read along with the lectors or with anybody who is serving throughout the Mass. What you can do is you can really already have it taken in, already soak up what's being read, and you can just focus. You can focus on the way that it's being projected to you, what Jesus wants to speak to you, how he wants to speak to you through these readings, what specifically is standing out to you in them. Is there a word? Is there a phrase? Something that you were focusing on while you were preparing to enter into Mass? Maybe it differs a little bit now that you're actually in Mass. These are things that we can do to help us really enter into this time of celebration, this time of being with Christ. So reading ahead of time, not just the two readings, the responsorial psalm and the gospel, but also, looking into what are the little phrases that are said, the responses during the Alleluia, because sometimes, the musicians, maybe they choose to do a very common one that's used every single week, but in reality, it does change every time. So what are the differences in the readings? What are we reading ourselves? What is happening throughout these readings? Another really easy thing for us to do is, to really just let it all out there. Like, what are you offering up during this Mass? What do you want to give that's on your heart? What are you struggling with? Especially now, like we have our fears, we have our doubts, we don't know what's going on. The future looks a little scary and a little uncertain right now. And so what are you going to be giving at the Mass? What are you going to be giving up to Jesus during adoration? This is a time for us, especially during the offertory of Mass, for us to give our anxieties, for us to give our fears, for us to give our stress, our frustrations, for us to just give it all up to Christ, and to give it to him so that he can bring it to his Father, our Father, and that it can be given and prayed for throughout the Mass with the communion of saints, with all of the rest of our community. Whether they hear us, we've said it to them or not, they know to pray for all of the parishioners here at Sacred Heart, all of the members of our diocese. And so having an intentional prayer intention that you can give at the start of every Mass and as you're entering into adoration, that's a great way to do. That's a great thing for us to do, to really be able to share ourselves and to share our heart with God the way that God shares his heart with us on the altar at every single Mass and throughout adoration. And it's very easy to say, like, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write them down. It's another thing to really follow through with it. So I really do encourage, if you have a notebook, if you just want to do like a post-it note, I oftentimes do that, is I have a little post-it note of my prayer intention, and I'll make sure it's somewhere visible for me, whether it's, sitting in the Missalette book that I'm using, or just like somewhere present that I can see it throughout the Mass. And so knowing what your intention is before going into Mass, rather than having to just think of something on the spot during offertory, is a very easy way for us to enter into the Mass and to the celebration and the prayer that comes with that celebration. Now, another really hard thing to talk about, or a really hard thing to grasp, is that there are a lot of distractions. Let's face it, there are crying babies, there are people coughing, there are people talking to each other, people are on their phones. There's a lot of things that can easily draw our attention away and make us want to turn our heads to see what's going on. And that's it's common, it's not something that we're going to tell you, you need to stop doing that right now. But what we want to help you with is to talk about what are some ways that you can take your focus away from those distractions and give it all solely to God, to make sure that you're present with him, that you're giving everything that you can to the Mass, even when you realize that you're flowing away, that you're getting sidetracked, you're taking your mind off of things. How do we bring our mind back to Christ? And there's a lot of different things that we can do. One thing is that I was taught when I was in confirmation is called the T-zone. And so it's something as simple as, where are you sitting at Mass? Where are you sitting during adoration? When you walk into the church, there's, it's called the T-zone. So it's the first couple of pews and then right in the middle. And that makes the T. But it's proven scientifically that when you're in that T-zone, it's easier for us to focus. It's easier for us to see what's happening right in front of us and to give our full attention to whoever is in front of us, to whatever is happening at the front of the church, in front of the room, whatever it may be. So something as simple as, where are you sitting? That could help with your distractions. That can help with you focusing solely on the readings, focusing solely on what's happening on the altar during Mass and during adoration. Another thing that we can do is, just try to focus on what's happening on the altar. Try to focus on the reader, try to focus on the priest, focus on the musician, what's happening throughout the Mass, and where is our focus being drawn. So if the lector is up at the ambo, but we're watching the priest, that's not going to help us, because yes, the priest is important and he is our celebrant, but at that moment, that lector is the one who God is using to speak to us. And so we need to focus on every aspect of the Mass as it's happening. So not just, when the musicians are singing, that's great, and we need to focus on the words that are happening, the words that they have chosen to use, the songs they've chosen to use, but also once they're done singing, don't keep staring at them. Draw your focus back and change your attention to, where is the Mass now? Who is God now using to speak to me in this Mass? And so it's important to know the flow of Mass. It's important to know how the Mass goes, which is why we've been covering the Mass for so long. And it's taken so many sessions for us to really talk about, what is the Mass? What do we do? What are the prayers? What is the order of Mass? So that you can see and understand that there are different places that we need to focus our time to. And so as hard as it may be to really keep going and keep following with it, once you understand that there is a flow of things, it's easier for you to focus. It's easier for you to know, okay, there's going to be a reader now. Okay, now we're going to do the responsorial psalm. And it's easier for you to keep your attention focused on what is happening up there if you understand this is the order of the Mass, this is the flow of it. And so really just giving your full attention by keeping your eyes on whoever is serving at that moment, whoever is being used by God, whoever is speaking, whoever's attention we should have on at that moment. Make sure your eyes are on them. Not just make sure you're listening to them, make sure you know that something is happening, but keep your eyes on them. Watch what they're doing. Because if you watch with detail what's happening, as the priest he's setting the altar, as the priest is preparing to enter into the Eucharistic celebration with us when he elevates the host and the chalice, like when all this is happening, it's very easy for us to enter in if our eyes are focused on what is happening. So really keep in mind, like, what is your posture? Where are your eyes being drawn to? Because those are the easiest ways for us to draw our attention to what needs to be drawn. Now, our ears, a lot of times, are the biggest distraction for us. We hear one little pin drop, one little sound, and we automatically want to give all of our attention to what's going on there. And this is something that will happen with practice. This is something that as you grow, as you continue to really focus on trying to give your attention solely to Christ throughout Mass, it becomes easier. It becomes something that you can train your ear to focus on what it wants to focus on, to focus on what is happening in front of you, rather than what is your little brother like messing with over here and why is he playing with the pews in the envelope. It's easier for us to understand that when we give all of our attention, not just our mind, not just our eyesight, but also our ears, what we're hearing, when you give all of your senses completely over to Christ in the Mass and in adoration, it's easier for us to focus. Because when you give all of your senses to God, he gives all of his attention back to us. And so it's easy for us to give our attention to somebody when we know that they want it back. It's easy for us to look at somebody and say, oh, they're looking at me, they're giving me their attention, I need to give the same to them. And so when you understand that Christ is present on the altar, when he's present in the Eucharist at adoration, when we see that his focus is solely on us and he is facing towards us and he is watching us the whole time and he is looking down on us, it's easier for us to give that attention. So really work on what's your posture, like where is your attention being given? If you're being easily distracted, like what are ways that you can really work on getting away from those distractions? It might be something as, I remember when I was in high school, my dad used to fidget a lot in Mass, and I used to have to sit with somebody in between the two of us because he would constantly distract me. And so it's things like that, like maybe there's a certain family member or friend that you go to Mass with that you can't sit directly next to because it's very distracting. Maybe it's something like you asking your family, hey, can we sit in a different area because I'm finding it very difficult to focus over here. And, little changes like that where you sit, who you sit next to could really help you give your attention fully to Christ in every way that we possibly can. And so there are just different things that you can do with that about being physically present. And now another thing that's very important for all of us is, we've talked about this in the past sessions, but are you responding? Are you responding in Mass? Are you responding in adoration? Are you just like following along? Are you just going through the motions? Or are you actively responding and listening to what is happening around you? There's the responsorial psalm, which in itself, the name is response, where you respond to what is happening, to what is said. But it's also things like, do you know the prayers that are being said at Mass? You guys were sent the different prayers, some of the different prayers that are said at Mass, such as the Our Father, the Nicene Creed, and some of the other ones. Do you know these ahead of time, or do you rely on the screens that are in our parish to say them? When it comes down to it, if you don't have to constantly look at the screens the whole time, you can give your focus over to Christ rather than constantly having to move your attention somewhere else. And this is something that's very easily done. So take a look at those prayers that were sent to you. Do you know them by heart, or do you kind of need some time to work on them? And now that we're all home right now and we have a bunch of free time on our hands, this is the perfect opportunity for us to learn these prayers, so that when we come back together as a parish and we celebrate the very first Mass back in our parishes after all of this, you'll be able to give your full attention and your full responses to the Lord. You'll be able to give your attention to him. You'll be able to respond in a way that you never have before, because your attention can solely be on what is happening right in front of you, rather than the aids that are being given for people who don't know these prayers. I challenge you, and I hope that you challenge yourselves, to really look into these, to really think about what parts of the Mass do I struggle with, what parts of the Mass do I rely on the screens, do I rely on my family telling me when to sit, when to stand, when to kneel, and really look into how can I be more assertive in this, and how can I take ownership of my prayer life and of these distractions that cause me to not focus enough on Mass and adoration. And what it really comes down to is, what are you willing to put into Mass? What are you willing to put into adoration? Because if you know what you're willing to give, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to put first in your life, it's easier for you to focus on those things. It's easier for you to see, these are things that I need to change so that I can give my attention solely to Christ and to God and to my parish and to my community. And so I really challenge you guys to look into this. What can you do, especially this week when you go to Mass and adoration this week, what can you do to give all of your attention to Christ? This is a very good time for us to practice because, we're at our homes, where we can put ourselves in our own room with nobody around us and focus on this. And that really is a great way for us to start trying to focus on things. Some of us may have family members or little siblings or whatever, dogs, animals, running around in the background. That can be a distraction. And that's a great way to start seeing what can I do to really hone in and to really think about, okay, there's things that are distracting me right now, but this is how I can make sure that I'm toning those out. I'm making sure that I'm in the zone and I'm giving all of my attention fully over to Christ.
Blessed be God. Blessed be His holy name. Blessed be Jesus, true God and true man. Blessed be the name of Jesus. Blessed be His most sacred heart. Blessed be Jesus in the sacrament of the altar. Blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete. Blessed be the great precious Jesus.